we are going to be creating an EC2 and then launching and configuring the EC2 and then launching and using that particular EC2. Now, to begin with, the very first thing is, what is an EC2? What does that mean, EC2? EC2 stands for Elastic Compute Cloud. Elastic Compute Cloud, and it is the component in AWS that is used to create computation, and it is used to create virtual computation, meaning that what you have, it is used to create like a server, like a computer remotely. This is what we call an EC2. So you have to think of an EC2 as a virtual server. And when we say even virtual, it's not necessary, but just that it's a remote server whereby you can create and configure and do whatever it is that you want to do with that particular server. And for this lab, you are going to be hosting a very simple website, very basic. Every instruction is given to you, meaning we are going to create, we configure, we connect, and then we install one or two things, and then we access it. That is that simple. So I'll just go through the basic things to show you the different things that you will be doing. Now, as I've said, for this particular classroom is where most of the things you'll be doing is about studying. Now, when you study a couple of things here, there will be also another class that I will add you to it. I'll add you to another classroom. For now, these are the two classrooms. For now, these are the separate ones that you have. You have AWS Architecting, Cloud Architecting for one for CSE, and then one for TV and software engineering. And then I will also add you to this particular classroom. It is not yet confirmed. The classroom is still not confirmed, where I cannot add you, but maybe by today, latest by tonight, I will be able to add you to what we call academic learner labs. Now, learner labs is what? It's a place whereby you can use to actually build AWS architecture, so you can design and build and deploy, do whatever you want, but with a limited credit. So the credit, I think, is $100. So you have to manage that credit very well. So in AWS Learner Labs, what will you be doing? There is not that much restriction, meaning you can open the Learner Labs if you want to launch an EC2, if you want to use an S3, if you want to do, so you are allowed to do different things for free there, but within $100 limit dollars, between $100 limitation. That would be your limitation. Now, and the class that you are currently in right now contains more of the theory and some of the lab practice. But when I add you to the learner labs is just for you to what? To practice a bit in terms of implementation. So for this lab one, what are you going to do and how are you going to submit this thing? First of all, if you come to this particular module, you see there are different sections about discussing about different things about the architecturing, the theory, introduction, and everything else about even security. But for now, we will be focusing on the module that is talking about EC2, which is this one, adding a complete layer of using EC2. But this is not that much of an introduction. It's more of a technical aspect, and has more details to it compared to just basic normal introduction to EC2. And if you go through the introduction, you will be able to see they will give you different resources, different videos, different PDFs telling you what is an EC2, how to configure an EC2, how to launch an EC2. So you can go through these things to just understand some of the basic concepts that we will have, because as I've told you before, the path of our theory doesn't necessarily match or align itself with what we are going to be doing in practice. So because of that, sometimes you will need to come back to these things and then just try and understand some basics from these classes that I've created. These modules are provided by AWS, as I've told you before. These things, you cannot modify them, you cannot change them, you can just use it as it is. Now, after you read a couple of times, let's say, for example, you've read, now you want to do a basic practice. How are you going to do it? For each of these modules, there's a part whereby it contains a lab, and most of it is a guided lab. A guided lab means that they will give you the instruction of how to perform the lab, each and every step. So this is also where you can actually practice. So let's try to say EC2, okay, and then let's launch anything so that we can use EC2. and trying to see a lab that will allow you to actually use this thing. Most of these labs will be restricted. So depending on the lab that you choose, will actually allow you to create and do different things inside. Okay, let's go to module 5. Okay, let's just go to this one, creating a dynamic website, because we know that for you to have a dynamic website, what do you need? You need to have an institute has to be created. Now, this is a particular lab. If I want to complete this lab, how am I going to do, and what will I be able to do? Now, this is a view that you will not see this particular view, because this, as a teacher, my own view is different. So I have to go to view as a student, whereby it will change and show me the view that you as a student will have access to. Now, this is a lab. If I want to complete this lab, this is when you select on the lab, you will see a panel that comes like this one. And then they will give you a time where you have to complete that lab within that time. Now, the problem with these ones is that once that time elapses, you are not also allowed to access this thing. So you have to make sure that you complete your tasks within the actual time. And you can actually start and stop the lab whenever you feel like it. Let's say, for example, you just started, then you realize, okay, you cannot do this one, you have to pause to go and check for something else. Then you can decide to stop the lab at any point. So in this case, we are going to start the lab and see how to just integrate and the different things that you can actually do before I give you the actual assignment that you have to complete. And sometimes it takes a bit of time, but not that much time whenever you are starting and ending a particular lab. And once you see, after starting the lab, you see the time is given to me. A maximum time of 3 hours is given for you to complete this lab. This is things you cannot change. These are automatically given by AWS. So for now, let's try to see if we can actually access the console, because when it is not yet green, it means that it is not still accessible. Okay, and also the fact that I was already using with a different account, so it will try to make sure that I first log out before I can actually use it. So after logging out, I'll come back, close this one. And then open the console. And this is now what you call the AWS console that we can actually use. And it will show you the different things that you've used, the different services, the different resources. And for those of you who have used AWS console before, this is the console that you have. Now, if you want to use with your free account also, you will also get something similar to this. But the difference is that with your free account, sometimes they ask for a credit card, and there are a lot of different things, that the different restrictions that you might not allow you to actually use it. So that's why I'm using AWS Academy. Now, whenever I launch this one, now I'm using it as a student. There are different things that I can perform. There are different services that I can actually use. Now, just to explore the generality of the AWS console that we'll be seeing, if we try to say, let's say, for example, all services, you want to see all the different services that is provided by AWS. Now, the services are divided into categories, different categories. When we say, for example, compute, it means that what the computation power, what can you do to for computation? What are the different services that AWS provide to you that will allow you to do some computation? And you see there are a couple of them. That's Lambda, whereby you can do computation without any serverless computation. You just write a function, and you don't need to declare or configure any server. You just host it, and then whenever someone's called that function automatically runs without you configuring any server. So these are things that can be used for automation and different things. As I've said, you do not have to know all of these different services, because nobody knows everything inside here, but you have to try to know the key features and how to use those key services. For example, for compute, things like EC2 and Lambda, these are things that you have to be able to do. You have to know, even Elastic Beanstalk, but optionally. But for EC2 and things like Lambda, you have to understand them. You have to be able to use them because we're using them in our lab. Things like storage, you have to understand how S3 is actually works, or maybe AWS backup. But the main feature, the main service in storage is what we call the S3, which is a storage service. One of the labs will be based on this particular S3. The database services that is provided by AWS, how do you integrate them? How do you create your database? How do you put data in your database? How do you do a backup? How do you link your database to your front end? And all of these different things are provided. And there are multiple different services that are provided. So those are the main ones. You can go to the network service, blockchain, a lot, AI, machine learning, which I will not be diving into. So these are the different types of services that you can actually use in AWS. And for your lab, we'll be focusing on this particular service, which is the EC2, the Elastic Compute Cloud. Now, as I've mentioned, Elastic Compute Cloud is what it is, a server that is hosted in AWS that you can create and manage and declare and do whatever it is that you actually need to do inside your own server. And for your first lab, we'll be using this thing to create a server. Then we connect to that server. Then we install a web server. Let's say, for example, you can install what different web server do you know? You know things like XAMPP and anything that can host a website. So it's called a web server. So we'll install web server, and then we'll just add a single file inside that web server, and then we try to access that web server. That is the main task that you have to do. And I'll just I will not go into the whole thing, explain the whole thing, because these things you have to practice by yourself. But I'll explain to you a bit the generality. Now, once you go to launch an instance, what is the purpose of this? This is where you create the actual instance itself, when you say launch instance. And when we say creating instance, EC2 instance, it means a particular server that you want to create. Now, the first thing is that they ask you for a name. This one is mandatory. It's not mandatory, but you have to provide a name. You can say my web server or whatever it is that you are creating. So that can be the name of your EC2. Now, once you provide the name of your EC2, you have to provide what we call the Amazon machine image, which is basically the operating system that will be on your server that you are creating. Now, there are different ones, and by default you have Amazon Linux, you have Mac OS if you are trying to create a Mac OS server, you have Ubuntu if you are trying to create an Ubuntu server, if you want to use a Windows server, Red Hat. So all of these options are available for you to actually choose them, whichever one you need based on your requirement. What are you trying to achieve? You will decide that and then decide which particular server to use. Now, but for our labs, most of the cases will be working with the Ubuntu Linux distribution. Is what you will be using for most of the labs. But it's not limited to that. You can also use things like Windows if you want. As I've said, it's because the lab is online, we cannot do too many things because I cannot check your remote desktop protocol. And you will still be able to do it. In the other labs, we'll be creating Windows Server, and then we'll be using things like RDP to connect and then manage our server. Now, once you choose the image, there are many things that you can choose also. This one comes with different characteristics. You see, each and everything that we'll be choosing, we have to make sure that it is free tier eligible. Otherwise, you will not be able to choose. You cannot just configure to have 100 gigabyte SSD, this number. It's not like that. So when we are using a free tier, many things will be restricted, and we have to use things within those limitations and restrictions. And also the instance tier, whereby we declare the storage is declared and other properties configuration that are declared. Most of these things you will see maybe one or two free tier options. Everything else will almost be you have to pay. You see, most of them you have to pay a lot of money, and whenever those ones are there, you cannot choose them. You have to make sure you stick to the default one, because those ones are mostly for free tier. Now, there's something called also key pairs, and also in your lab manual that I've provided in Google Classroom, the definition of all of these things is given to you. What are key pairs? What are security groups? What are each and every part of this thing? It is provided to you, so you have to check it out before you do these things. Now, in your lab manual, you have to see that you have to create a new key pair. Now, the purpose of creating this new key pair, it will allow us to use our own terminal to connect to our server that we are hosting in AWS. So you can use the terminal, or you can use a software called Potic PUTTY. It is a software that is used. If you have, let's say, for example, Windows, you can use this PuTTY to connect through SSH to your server. But if you have things like Linux and Ubuntu, you can just use the command line directly. And also with Windows, you can use the command line directly, but you have to make sure that your Windows OpenSSH is enabled. If you enable OpenSSH, then in that case, you can also use the command line to connect to your server. So for now, let's say, for example, we have to create a key pair. We have to give the name, say new Ubuntu, or whatever it is that you want to call your key pair. This thing is lagging. And then you say create key pair. You see, now this one says that you are not authorized to do this operation, as I've told you before, because these labs are also restricted, because they understand that no, for this particular lab, you don't need to connect from your terminal. So it will tell you that you are not allowed to do this. But if we were in this lab that I mentioned to you that I'll be adding you, the AWS Learner Lab, in that case, you'll be able to create and launch the instance the way you actually want. So I will add you to the Learner Labs, whereby you will have to create this key pair. And once you create the key pair, you have to download it. Do not make a mistake that you create a key pair and you do not download it. Otherwise, you will never be able to access the EC2 again. So each and every time you create a key pair, be very careful. You always have to download that particular key pair. So for now, as I said, the account is restricted with a lot of things that you cannot do. But with the Learner Labs, is where it is just built for practice. It's not specific instructions. You just open it and then you start practicing. So that one, I will add you to it once it is enabled also by AWS. I think by today, those ones you will receive that email to join the Learner Labs. So these ones, this class is for you to learn the theory and a bit of practice. And then the Learner Labs is where you will be doing your actual practice. And sometimes also I'll come to this one and I will ask you, okay, go and complete this particular challenge. And then I will know, like for example, for this one, your progress will be recorded automatically. I will not ask you to submit anything. I will just go to your account and then I'll see your progress. What have you done? What is it that you've not done? And everything else will be recorded. But for this first lab, that will not be the case, because you see, you cannot create things like key pair and stuff like that. So let me come back to what key pair. These are just an encrypted text whereby it will allow you to connect to your server. That's the main thing. Whenever you are using SSH, we need to have this encryption that will actually allow us to connect to the server. So once you create it, once you are connecting with the terminal, you can select those things. And then there are some different network configuration. Even in this one, you are not allowed to change most of these things. But as I've said, the one that you will be using, you'll be able to change, let's say, for example, the network. In this case, it has already been created by default. And then we have something called security groups. And this is very important aspect whenever we talk about cloud computing and cloud computing resources. Now, what they are a set of protocols that actually govern what? The accessibility of a particular resource. What does that mean? It means that whenever we create a resource in the cloud, we need a set of protocols that tells us that, okay, this particular IP address is allowed to access, this particular IP address is not allowed to access. This thing is allowed, this is not allowed. This person, this type of protocol. So those different rules are what we call the inbound rules. So, and they are created under what we call security groups. So this is also an important aspect. All of you have to know how to declare or create these different security groups, and then you have to configure the storage and then also advantages. For now, as I've said, I'll allow most of these things by default, but there are some things that you need to change here when you'll be performing your lab tasks, very basic things, and then you launch the instance. Now, the key pair that we wanted to create is not a given, so you just say proceed without a key pair. You see, it is written that this is not a recommended thing that you should do, but as I've said, this is just for demonstrative purposes. We are going to proceed without any key pair. Okay, now the instance is already created. Now, this is what I was explaining in class, that regarding to, let's say, for example, whenever you talk about launching an instance or a server to make it ready compared to traditional means where you have to buy this, configure, do this one. So in a couple of minutes, you have just created that particular instance. Now, let's go back to instances and see if we can actually see the instance that we created. So you see, this one is from the lab. This one, we did not create this one. It came automatically because, as I've said, we are within a particular lab. That one we did not create. And this is the instance that we actually created, this first one, which is called my web server. And this is what, as I've said, if you read the instruction of your lab manual, every screenshot that you have to provide, it has to include the URL within the screenshot. So let's say, for example, if I asked you that you have to provide the screenshot for the EC2 configuration, maybe any configuration within the EC2. Now, if I want to take the screenshot, you cannot just come from here and take the screenshot where your URL is not visible. Those type of screenshots will not be accepted. Every single screenshot, you have to make sure that the URL of the web page is actually included in it. So there's a reason why I'm saying that. And since now we've already created our server, now we can try to connect to the server to launch the server. As I've said, with SSH we cannot connect because we do not have any key pair, and then these things did not actually work. So let's try to connect with just the instance by itself. You see, even this one also, you are not allowed to connect to the instance. As I said, all of these errors do not actually happen when we are in learner labs. It is because of the restriction, a lot of restriction whenever it is a lab, because they know you do not need to connect to anything. Everything is configured in a way that you just do whatever is needed. So, but in your labs that you'll be doing, you have to connect to this SSH. When you connect like this, then you can type in, let's say, for example, different command terminal, how to maybe install HTTP and everything else from the terminal. That one you will do it inside this particular window after it is connected to that in your EC2 instance. For now, it is not allowed because we are in the confine of a lab, a specific lab that is designed to do a specific thing, and most of the other things are not allowed. So this is how these are the main things that I wanted to show, not the main things, but just an overview of a particular EC2 instance. After you do this, then there's all the commands that you need to install the HTTP to run, and then change a couple of things, and then submit your screenshot is actually given to you. Now, let's say, for example, after we have connected, let's go to, let's go to security. And inside here, we have security groups. So if I click on this particular security groups, it will open to me a page. Now, this is the security group that is governing what? The communication through my EC2, because it is the security group that is selected by default. Now, I want to change this thing, because if I allow it like this, I will never be able to have a web server. And who can tell me why? If this was the security group, why is it that this cannot be a web server? Anybody from inside? We just say from here, from what we can see here, as I've told you, the security groups, these are the rules that actually govern what the communication or connection to a particular instance. So you will define the different protocols that you are allowed to access a particular instance. Now, as I've told you, most of these things are called inbound rules, but there's also what we call outbound rules. But outbound, we are not going to discuss about it for now. We are just talking about the inbound rules. What are the security protocols that are allowed to be able to access to this resource, this EC2 that we created? For now, we only have one thing, which is what? It is SSH. We can only connect to this thing through SSH, nothing else. Now, when it says that we can only connect to it through SSH, can it be a web server? You can't have a web server whereby it accepts only SSH connection. Then in that case, you don't have a web server. You can have a server that is like that, but if you want specifically a web server, it has to allow things like HTTP. You have to use HTTP protocol to be able to connect to the server. So in that case, the instruction is also given in your lab manual that is posted. So you have to edit the inbound rules, and then you have to add a new rule, because we want that this particular server that we have, we want to allow a new rule to connect to it. And what is the type of protocol that we want to allow? What is the protocol For web server, someone has to answer. For web server, what do you think is a protocol that we want to allow so that whenever someone sends that particular protocol, a connection should be allowed to the web server?
Sorry, HTTP.
Yes, it's basic. HTTP is a protocol that we want to allow. So in this case, you have to go down and select HTTP. Let's say this is HTTP. So there are a lot of different protocols. If you want to create, let's say, an RDP, what the DNS server, if you want to create your own DNS server, you can have it. So in this case, we've selected HTTP. Now, even now, there is still a bit of it's not yet completed. We have to select the source. And the source, there are different options that will be given to you. Let's say, for example, if I put in here my IP address, what does that mean? It means that no matter what, if the request that it is receiving is not from this particular IP address, then that connection will not be accepted. It will just tell you that no, it cannot access this thing. The server doesn't exist or it is not available. So these are the sources are what the IP address that are allowed to have access to it. Because sometimes you might want HTTP, but you don't want everyone to access it. You want to limit it to a certain number of people, maybe by IP address or maybe by subnetting and everything else. So in this case, there are different options. You can say everyone from IPv6 or IPv4. So you can choose this one, or you can say custom, and then you customize and write the IP address that you want to allow. Now, for this one, we are just going to say everyone from IPv4, meaning it doesn't matter where somebody is. If he sends a request to this particular server, HTTP request, allow him to access it. So that is what you do, and then you save it. Now, we have to make sure that our server now can be accessed by HTTP. Now, my question to you is that if we go back to our instance, let's go to the EC2 that we created, and let's see. If I open this IP address, what will happen? I'm trying to access it. Absolutely nothing will happen because it's not a web server. We just created a server, but though we are saying it will accept HTTP to what? We did not install any particular web server on that EC2. So you see, it will not go to any place. But once we install a web server, it can be HTTP server, it can be, let's say, XAMPP, any type of web server that you are familiar with. You can install it. The command to install a simple web server is also given to you in your manual. And after we install that web server, then once you access this one, you will see what? You will see the index inside here, the file, the index file, the first file. And for now, just keep it to be a static file. You have to host a single file, nothing more. And in your instruction, you have to change a couple of things. Whatever is in the file, you have to add your student ID so that whenever it comes here, the HTTP page has to have your student ID. That's the only main thing that you have to change from what is given to you. So that is the main thing that you have to go through. You have to go through the manual. You can go through the manual that is provided to you. The steps might not be exactly the same because, as I've said, these things, AWS, they change a lot very often. So the steps, one or two things might be different. And if you have any issues on a particular steps, you can come back to the module and you go to that particular step inside here, whereby a theory is given and also a bit of practical is given of how to set up that particular resource. So that is what you have to do. And as I said, by tonight, I will add you to the Learner Labs. And by Saturday, everyone has to submit the lab. And what do I expect for you as submission? In the lab manual, everything is according to different, let me see. There are many tags. So everything is divided into separate tags. So for each and every one of these tags, what you have to do, you have to provide a screenshot. Let's say, for example, that is for tax number 1, launching a particular EC2. That is the first task, launching an EC2. Now, once you launch your EC2 and your EC2 is running, like you see mine here is running, you have to come to this side where I see that everything is running, and you make a screenshot of this particular task. It means, okay, you've completed task 1. Then once you complete again task 2, you make a screenshot of that particular task 2, and so on and so forth. So you have to do each and every one of those things. So you have to do each and every task that you do. You launch, you make a screenshot. Now, I'm saying each and every task, not each and every step. Let's say, for example, task 1 has multiple steps. I don't mean that. Let's say, for example, this is task 1, and you don't have to come and then once you choose an EMA, you make a screenshot. Once you do step 3, you make a screenshot. You don't have to do that. You have to make one screenshot for a single tax. So each and every one of those things, I think there are 7 or 8 different tax. And when I say tax, it's just a step of how to reach the desired things that we want, which is what? We want to create an EC2, which is a virtual server in the cloud. It is the most basic computing services that we can use, compute. And then we want to launch that particular compute. We want to start it. And then after we start, we want to connect to it. And then after we connect, what do? We want to install web server. And then after installing the web server, we want to change the security groups. I just showed you how to add security groups. Once you have the security groups, then you just come to the public IP, then you launch this one, and then you will see your website that you've actually hosted. And you make those screenshots, and then you submit them. And after you do that, you have to delete everything. So after you do each and every one of these things, you have to come here and then you have to make sure you terminate each and every one of these. You have to terminate both of them. You have to terminate or delete the instance. After you complete everything and submitted the screenshot, always try to delete everything so that the resources will not be consumed when you are not using it. So that is the main things that you have to do. Go through the lab manual. It has the description of the different steps. It has the steps that you have to follow it, complete the task, and submit within by Saturday or maybe by next week. I'll see regarding the deadline. You have to submit it by next week. And when you are submitting, do not zip it. Your submission, the images should not be zipped because I don't want to download the files to evaluate. I just want to evaluate you directly from Google Classroom. So do not zip it, just upload the files as individual files and submit it, the screenshots. And the name of the screenshot, you can just say tax 1, tax 2, tax 3, up to 7 or 8, each and every, just like that. With your student ID, you know this naming convention. You say tax 1 _ you have your student ID, then you upload the images. And then I will evaluate the images later on that you've submitted. Is there any question? Is it clear what you have to do?
Sir.
Yes.
So can we make a PDF with all the screenshot and submit the PDF?
Yes, that is also fine. Yes, that is. I think that would even be easier. You can just make one single file. The thing is that I don't want any zip file. That's my problem. Yes, you can put it in there. You can put all the files in a single PDF as different pages and submit it. That's fine. But do not zip.
Sir?
Yeah, yes.
So for this lab, we just need to do the task from the PDF and we don't need to go through any of those specific modules, right, from the academy?
No, you don't need to go through the modules of specific academy because, as I've said, the labs, the PDF that is provided to you is how you do the practical one. Let's say, for example, the tax. Usually with the academy is where you will learn, if you want to learn some of the theory that is related to the tax. You want to learn what is security groups or EC2. You'll come to this module. There's a video, I believe, where they will talk about security groups configuration or things like that. You can check it and then you perform the task. And this particular platform here that you see that I just launched this one just to demonstrate to you how the things will work. These ones is also for practice. As I've said, later on, I will give you different assignment that is specifically inside the modules. There will be assignments like that I'll tell you, okay, go and complete this particular assignment before this date. And for those assignments, I will not need you to submit anything. I'll just go, because right now I'm viewing as a student, so I cannot see everything here. You see, if I leave the student view, I'll be able to see and go to your grades and see how much have you completed among the tasks. And for each and every one of these tasks, you see from here, the instructions is given. Most of these labs are guided, meaning the steps that you need to do are given to you. In this case, these are the different steps you need to do. The architecture is given to you, that, okay, this is the starting architecture. Before you create anything, this is how your architecture looks like. And then they want you to have an architecture like this, to create these ones and add those extensions. The things that are not added, you have to add it inside your architecture. Like, let's say, for example, this one, they don't have any load balancer. Then later on, they can ask you, okay, you have to create a load balancer to add to this architecture. So that is how these ones are done. Those type of assignment, I will also give them to you. But as I've said repeatedly, you have to make sure that this time you should be very careful with it. If you allow the time to completely finish, I think twice, then maybe next time they will restrict, you will not be able to access it. So only start these labs when you need to use them. Or if you want to practice and you don't, you just want to practice and try and test some few things, of course, you can use it without any problem. But as I've said, from before midnight by today, I'll add you to the Learner Lab. And the Learner Lab is also free, whereby there are no restrictions. You can do whatever you want. But still, when I say there are no restrictions, it means that it is still a free tier. Those restrictions are there, but they will not tell you, okay, you cannot connect to SSH, you cannot do this like these particular labs are doing. So I will add you to those ones also. So yes, you don't have to follow these specific ones, but you have to be careful about the time. I believe that everyone, there's one particular ID who did not submit his email. There's one person that I think did not submit. I don't want to open the files right now, but there's one student who will have to submit. He has to make sure that he sends me his email. If please, you did not submit your email and ID, you have to submit it, because I will not be able to add you to the AWS classes. Okay. Yes, in the Learner Labs. Because these labs are restricted. You see, these labs are very restricted. I just demonstrated to you, let's say, for example, how to create a key pair. But this lab says you cannot, they don't allow you, are not authorized, because for the labs, the way the labs are designed, you do not need a key pair. So since they realize you don't need a key pair to connect, so they will just not allow you to create one. So that's the restriction with these labs. But with the Learner Labs, it's a place where you can practice. There are no restrictions like that. You can just practice and create whatever you want. But you have $100 limit credit. So that's the main thing you have to manage with that one. So yes, in this case, you don't need to do it here. You have to do it in the Learner Labs. But still, you can practice here if you need to. Okay, I believe that is the, I want to end the lab today, but before I do that, I have to take, how many of you are present and who are absent? I believe one student is absent. Okay. And please, if you have any question why doing it, or maybe you are stuck with something, you can always let me know in your Google Classroom. Then we can discuss from there. Let me open and take your attendance very quick. Okay, ID 102. 108.
Yes, sir.
11. 12.
Present, sir.
13.
Yes, sir.
16.
Present, sir.
17.
Yes, sir.
18.
Yes, sir.
25.